What's up, guys? Welcome back to After the Credits, the review show that no one asked for. Today we are talking about Final Fantasy X, and this was a fun one for me. It's my first turn-based Final Fantasy game. The only other Final Fantasy I've ever played is Final Fantasy 15, which I don't know if it really counts. I guess it kind of does, but it's an action game as opposed to a turn-based game. So this is my first real dive into the turn-based Final Fantasy series. And yeah, we're going to talk about all about that today. Before we get into it, huge shout out to Jake from the YouTube community for recommending this one to me. Appreciate it, but without further ado, let's dive in and start talking about Final Fantasy X. Final Fantasy X follows Titus or Titus or Titus or whatever you want to call him. I called him Titus throughout the entirety of the game, or Titus, one of those two. But essentially, he is a star blitzball player from the city of Zanarkand, and he is mysteriously transported to the region of Spira after his home is attacked by a colossal entity known as Sin. But your main goal throughout this game is to find a way back to Zanarkand, and to do so, you join a group of guardians tasked with protecting a summoner along her pilgrimage to each temple throughout this region of Spira, where she obtains aeons that are powerful beings that are needed in order to defeat Sin. So Titus is trying to defeat Sin in the hopes that by doing so, he will return to Zanarkand. Now, as always, this is a very condensed version of the story. It's not my objective to ruin the game for you by telling you all of the surprises and twists and turns the game has to offer. And trust me, this game is much more intriguing and enthralling than I made it sound with that opening statement. But I don't want to ruin it for you. Even though this game is 20 years old, there's a lot of us as gamers have blind spots. There's just simply too many video games out there that we can't all play them all. So I don't want to ruin it. This game is very, very interesting. A lot of fun. The story is one of the best aspects of the game, but hopefully I gave you enough there. That way, if you haven't played it, it might interest you a little bit. Visually, the game is not going to blow you away, which is expected given the game's age. Even the FMV cutscenes, while very impressive for its time, do still look a little bit rough here in the year of our Lord 2025. Surprisingly, I think the HD remaster, which is what I played, actually looks worse than the original PS2 version. The updated character models sometimes just clash with the pre-rendered backgrounds that were used in the original game, and it doesn't seem that the backgrounds were adjusted in any way, shape, or form. They just kept them straight from the PS2 version for the HD remaster. It's just a little bit jarring at times. But with that being said, it's not offensive, it's not going to ruin the experience for you, but it is an old game, and it shows its age. Now, for the most part, the sound design in this game is great. The voice acting is incredibly impressive, especially given the sheer amount of dialogue. This is actually the first Final Fantasy game to be fully voice acted, so very, very impressive in that regard. But that being said, there are a few odd sounding lines, most likely related to a translation issue. For example, every time the character says yes in the game, specifically Yuna, throughout the playthrough, it sounds like the same recording was used for the phrase yes, and they're just inserting that throughout the entire playthrough, and it just doesn't match tonally or inflectionally, I don't think that's a word, in the situations that it gets thrown in at times, so feels out of place a little bit there. Now, the music in Final Fantasy X is phenomenal. However, due to the nature of the game, the battle theme does start to wear on you after a while. Now, don't get me wrong, it's good the first 100 times you hear it, but with thousands of encounters in this type of game, it starts to feel a little bit repetitive. That being said, never hated it. It's a nice, fun, chipper track, but I would have appreciated a few extra tracks for just basic encounters for some variety. Now, there are some really good boss battle themes. For example, the final boss fight of the game is a really fun theme, and that's really, really nice. But yeah, only one basic battle theme for your random encounters. Now, as I mentioned in the intro, this is my first real Final Fantasy game other than Final Fantasy 15. And I gotta tell you, I was absolutely blown away by the storytelling in this game, especially the way that the game handles character development. There's a character in this game, a Ronzo character named Kamari, and he, fun fact, has 129 lines in the entire game. 40 hours long, he's got 129 lines. And for the first 5-6 hours, he doesn't say a word to you. But when he finally speaks, you know, I went from absolutely hating the character at the beginning to his first voice line that he said. I was like, all right, man, I fuck with Kamari now. And it just was crazy how that all worked out. And, you know, like I mentioned, Kamari, 129 voice lines, definitely the most stoic character in the party, the least interesting by a long shot, but that just speaks wonders for the rest of the cast. If Kamari is good, everybody else is going to be just as good as well, or they're going to be much better because they're going to have a much bigger impact on the game itself. All right, now let's talk about gameplay, and unfortunately this is where the game takes a bit of a hit for me, but it's definitely a me thing, not a general complaint by the community by any means, but turn-based combat over a long period of time that is required in this game does start to kind of wear me down a little bit, and that's the main reason that I tend to avoid this genre in the first place, is just I don't find the combat to be that engaging. You know, I love a good romp through a Pokemon game every now and then, but again, that's completely different, and you know, even Pokemon tends to get tiring for me. Speaking of Pokemon, Final Fantasy X has a similar battle system where elemental abilities deal extra damage to certain enemies. This plays a huge role in combat strategy, since you not only need to use Lulu's spells effectively, but also equip weapons with the right elemental affinities. I struggled with this at first, because my Pokemon-pilled brain assumed that water was the best counter to fire, but in this game, you actually want to use ice against fire. So, took a little bit of adjusting, but once I got the hang of it, it was pretty cool. And on top of that, every character has specific strengths and weaknesses. For example, Titus is incredibly fast, so he usually gets the first move in on an encounter, but at a base level, he hits about as hard as a napkin. So you have to invest in his strength a lot to make him really efficient and useful. Each party member also has an overdrive, which is essentially their ultimate move, which either deals massive damage or provides utility in battle. Overdrive meter fills in different ways, but at first it charges when taking damage. Later on in the game, you can unlock alternative methods like gaining charge from attacking or when allies take damage. Also, just want to touch on performance. For the most part, the game runs great. There are a few cutscenes with a lot happening where the frame rate did actually dip pretty hard, but during combat was always buttery smooth. Most of the map exploration was buttery smooth. It's just kind of in those really high action scenes, you might notice a few frame drops on your PS3. And then the last thing that I want to notice, which is incredibly important with this game, is every time you see a save point on your screen, you need to save. This game has no autosave feature, so if you die, you're going to have to go back to your previous save. It's going to throw a game over screen at you, and you're just going to be going back to wherever you saved last. So make sure you save at every location, you know, and, you know, even when you're trying to level your characters up, stay close to that save point. That way, if everybody gets low, you can touch the save point, and it'll not only give you a nice point in case you die, but it'll also refill all your characters' HP and MP, which is very important in this game. So just make sure you save often, as Miss Andreessen said in my computer class in high school. Save often, save often, save often. It's going to save you a lot of hassle for the future, for sure. All right, guys, so that's going to take care of the main talking points that I wanted to go through with the game, which leaves us with the conclusion, of course. I got to say, man, it's been about a week since I beat the game. I've just had a really busy week and haven't been able to make the video yet, but it has given me a lot of time to reflect back on my playthrough of this game, and I gotta tell you, with each passing day, my love for Final Fantasy X continues to get better and better, which says a lot about the game, man. It left such an impact on me once I rolled credits and got to the end of the game that it's only improved in my memory for the last 5 days. So I can definitely see why it's one of the community's favorite Final Fantasies. It is a very divisive one. Some people didn't like it so much because it is a very lovey-dovey story, but I don't know. I soaked it all up and loved every bit of it. And I gotta tell you, man, yeah, just ultimately phenomenal experience that I would recommend almost anybody play if you can handle the turn-based combat. It's well worth a playthrough, and just experiencing the story itself is 100% worth your time. As far as giving it a rating, we go on a tier list system here, S through D, well, S through Cheeks, essentially, Cheeks being the worst. I would give this game an A, I believe. I think I would probably slot it high A, almost S. I think this is one of the most fantastic video game experiences that I have ever had. It's got probably the best storytelling of any game I have ever played. And, you know, I loved all the characters. I loved the whole journey through the game, despite it being a turn-based game, which wore on me a little bit. But I don't necessarily think Final Fantasy is known for its combat. I think it is just known for the story that it tells, and this has an absolutely phenomenal story that is worth playing through without a question. So high A is a great spot for Final Fantasy X. But hey, when we do our end of year recap at the end of the year, this game might sneak up into the S tier. Very, very possible for this one. All right, guys, thank you guys so much for watching through another episode of After the Credits. I apologize for the delay with this one. This just happened to be a very long game, and I've happened to be extremely busy for the last few weeks, so it took me a while to get through it, but hopefully the wait was worth it. Again, thank you so much for all the support. Thank you for all the likes, comments, stuff, you know, subscribes, whatever it is. I appreciate it. All that stuff makes me feel very, very good. But until next time, thanks for watching. I love you all. Take care of yourselves, and we will see you on the next one.